The distant wail of a train whistle broke the stillness of the September evening, as Willow Edwards clutched her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. The year was 1876, and she had traveled over 1,000 miles from Philadelphia to Cannon City, Colorado, armed with nothing but a letter of agreement and the desperate hope that the man waiting for her would be kind. The platform of the Cannon City station was nearly empty as Willow stepped down from the train, her legs stiff after days of travel. Her gaze swept across the dusty wooden platform, searching for the man who would be her husband, a stranger whose advertisement in the matrimonial newspaper had promised a decent home and respectful treatment in exchange for a hard-working wife. "Miss Edwards," a deep voice called from behind her. Willow turned to find a tall man approaching, his face partially shadowed by the brim of a worn cowboy hat. As he drew closer, the fading sunlight revealed a weathered face with kind blue eyes, perhaps in his early 30s, with sun-streaked brown hair and a neatly trimmed beard. "Mr. Bennett Winters?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the hissing steam of the train. He nodded, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Yes, madam. Bennett Winters of Whispering Creek Ranch. Welcome to Cannon City." He stood awkwardly for a moment before reaching for her small trunk. "Is this all your belongings?" "Yes," Willow answered, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I'm afraid I don't own much." Bennett nodded without judgment. "That's fine. Colorado's a place for new beginnings, not dwelling on what came before." He gestured toward a wagon parked nearby. "The ranch is about an hour's ride from town. We should get going if we want to make it before dark." The ride to Whispering Creek Ranch was mostly silent. Willow stole glances at the man beside her, trying to reconcile the real Bennett Winters with the image she'd constructed from his letters. His hands were calloused, his skin tanned from years under the western sun, but there was a gentleness to his movements that gave her hope. "Your letters didn't mention how beautiful the land is," Willow finally said as they crested a hill that revealed the vast expanse of prairie stretching toward distant mountains. Bennett's expression softened slightly. "Words don't do it justice, Miss Edwards. The land out here. It gets into your blood." As the wagon rolled through the growing darkness, Willow observed the changing landscape. The prairie was nothing like the crowded streets of Philadelphia, with its endless horizon and sky that seemed impossibly vast. "There it is," Bennett said after they'd traveled for nearly an hour. "Whispering Creek Ranch." In the fading twilight, Willow could make out a modest homestead nestled against a backdrop of pines. A sturdy log cabin stood at the center, with a small barn and corral nearby. It wasn't grand, but it looked solid and well-maintained. "It's not much compared to what you're used to in Philadelphia," Bennett said, misinterpreting her silence. "No," Willow quickly assured him. "It's lovely, truly." After helping her down from the wagon, Bennett carried her trunk into the cabin. Inside, Willow found a simple but clean home. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a wooden table and chairs nearby. A curtain partially separated what appeared to be Bennett's sleeping area from the main room. "I've fixed up a room for you," Bennett said, gesturing toward a door at the back of the cabin. "It's small, but I thought you'd want your privacy until we're properly married." Touched by his consideration, Willow nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Winters. Bennett, please." He set her trunk down in the small bedroom. "I'll let you get settled. There's stew warming on the stove when you're hungry." Left alone, Willow surveyed her new room. A narrow bed with a handmade quilt stood against one wall, with a small dresser and washstand the only other furniture. The room was simple but clean, and Bennett had placed a small vase of wildflowers on the dresser, a gesture that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. After unpacking her meager possessions and washing the travel dust from her face and hands, Willow joined Bennett in the main room for a late supper. The beef stew was hearty and flavorful, surprising her. "You're a good cook," she commented. Bennett shrugged. "A man living alone learns to feed himself or starve, but I won't pretend I'm not looking forward to having someone else take over the kitchen." "I'm happy to do so," Willow assured him. "Though I should warn you, my cooking skills are modest at best." "Can't be worse than mine," Bennett replied with the hint of a smile. "Tomorrow I can show you around the ranch. It's not large compared to some, but it's growing. I run about 60 head of cattle and have 4 good horses." As they finished their meal, Willow fought to keep her eyes open, exhaustion from her long journey finally catching up with her. "You should get some rest," Bennett said, noticing her struggle. "Morning comes early on a ranch." Willow nodded gratefully and retreated to her small room. After changing into her nightgown, she slipped beneath the quilt, expecting sleep to claim her immediately. But as the minutes passed, she found herself staring wide-eyed at the ceiling. The silence was deafening compared to the constant noise of Philadelphia. And the darkness, it was absolute in a way she'd never experienced, with no street lamps or neighboring homes casting their glow through her window. But what disturbed her most was the feeling of being closed in, unable to see the vast sky she'd glimpsed during their journey. After an hour of restless tossing, Willow rose from her bed and crept to the cabin's front door. Opening it quietly, she stepped onto the porch and gasped. Above her stretched the most magnificent sight she'd ever beheld, thousands upon thousands of stars, more brilliant than she could have imagined, scattered across the inky blackness like diamonds. "Couldn't sleep," Bennett's voice startled her. She turned to find him sitting in a chair at the far end of the porch, barely visible in the darkness. "I'm sorry," she apologized. "I didn't mean to disturb you." "You didn't," he assured her. "I often sit out here before turning in. The night sky has a way of putting things in perspective." Willow nodded, her gaze returning to the heavens. "I've never seen stars like this. In Philadelphia, the city lights and smoke obscure most of them." "One of the blessings of the West," Bennett replied. "You're welcome to stay out here as long as you like, but don't catch cold. Nights get chilly even in September." With that, he rose and returned inside, leaving Willow to her stargazing. She remained on the porch until her eyelids grew heavy, then reluctantly returned to her room. As she lay in bed once more, the memory of the star-filled sky comforted her, and she finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Willow awoke to the aroma of coffee and the sound of movement in the main room. Dressing quickly in one of her 2 everyday dresses, she joined Bennett for a breakfast of bacon, biscuits, and strong coffee. "I hope you slept better after your stargazing," he said. "I did, thank you," she replied, though in truth, her sleep had been fitful at best. After breakfast, Bennett gave her a tour of the ranch. The property consisted of about 200 acres, with a creek running through it that gave the ranch its name. The barn housed 4 horses, 2 working horses, Bennett's personal mount, and a gentle mare he indicated would be hers if she wished to learn to ride. "I've never ridden before," Willow admitted. "Most city folk haven't," Bennett replied without judgment. "But out here, it's almost a necessity. I can teach you if you're willing." "I'd like that," she said, surprising herself with her eagerness. That afternoon, Bennett kept his word, giving Willow her first riding lesson on the gentle mare named Daisy. By the time the sun began to set, Willow was sore but exhilarated, having managed to guide Daisy around the corral several times without Bennett's assistance. "You're a natural," he told her as they put the horses away for the night. "I doubt that," Willow laughed, wincing at the ache in her thighs. "But I appreciate the encouragement." That night, after a simple dinner, Willow once again found herself unable to sleep in the confining darkness of her room. She slipped out to the porch, where Bennett was once again sitting in his chair. "The stars again?" he asked softly. "Yes," she admitted. "I've never needed them before, but now, it's as if I can't breathe without seeing them." Bennett considered this in silence for a moment. "The old-timers say that happens to some folks when they come west. It's like the big sky gets into your soul." They sat in companionable silence until Bennett finally rose to turn in. Willow remained, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead until her eyes grew heavy. The pattern repeated over the next several nights. During the day, Willow threw herself into learning the routines of ranch life: cooking, cleaning, tending the small vegetable garden, and continuing her riding lessons. But each night, she found herself sleepless until she'd spent time under the stars. On the fifth night, a sudden rainstorm drove her from the porch, and Willow spent the entire night tossing and turning, feeling suffocated by the solid roof above her head. The next morning, Bennett found her exhausted and red-eyed at the breakfast table. "You didn't sleep," he observed, concern evident in his voice. "The rain kept me from the stars," she explained weakly. "It sounds foolish, I know." "Not foolish," Bennett replied thoughtfully. "Just unexpected." That day, while Willow napped to recover from her sleepless night, Bennett disappeared into the barn with his tools. She thought nothing of it until dinner, when he mentioned casually, "I need to make a trip into town tomorrow for supplies. Would you like to come along? We can visit the Reverend about setting a date for the wedding, if you're still agreeable." The mention of the wedding sent a flutter through Willow's stomach. In the busy days of adapting to ranch life, she'd almost forgotten the purpose of her coming to Colorado. She and Bennett had developed a comfortable working relationship, but marriage was something else entirely. "Is something wrong?" Bennett asked, noticing her hesitation. "No," Willow assured him quickly. We barely know each other, Bennett," he nodded slowly. "That's true enough. But that's how most marriages start out here. Two people agree to join forces against the hardships of frontier life, and with luck and work, affection grows." He paused. "I respect you, Willow. I believe we could build a good life together. But if you've changed your mind—" "I haven't," she said firmly. "I came here to be your wife, and I intend to honor that commitment. I just wanted to be sure you still felt the same." "I do," Bennett said simply. "So tomorrow, town?" "Yes, that would be nice." The trip to Cannon City the next day was a welcome change of pace. The small but growing town was busy with activity: miners from the nearby coalfields, farmers bringing goods to market, and cowboys from surrounding ranches, all mingled on the dusty streets. Bennett first took Willow to meet Reverend Michaels at the small white church at the edge of town. The kindly older man welcomed them warmly, and after a brief conversation about their backgrounds and intentions, agreed to perform their wedding ceremony in 2 weeks' time. "That will give us time to publish the banns and make sure everything is proper," the Reverend explained. Afterward, Bennett escorted Willow to the general store, where he encouraged her to select fabric for a wedding dress. Overwhelmed by his generosity, Willow chose a simple cream-colored cotton that would be practical enough to wear again after the wedding. "Are you sure you don't want something finer?" Bennett asked. "This is perfect," Willow assured him. "I prefer simplicity." While the storekeeper's wife measured and cut the fabric, Bennett wandered through the store, adding items to their order that Willow couldn't see. On the wagon ride home, when she asked about the mysterious purchases, he merely smiled and said, "You'll see soon enough." That evening, as dusk fell, Bennett disappeared into the barn again, telling Willow not to wait up for him. Curious but respecting his privacy, she occupied herself with planning how to transform the cream fabric into a wedding dress. Her sewing skills were modest, but she was determined to create something beautiful for their wedding day. When Bennett still hadn't returned by her usual stargazing time, Willow made her way to the porch alone. The night was clear, the stars brilliant against the black sky. She lost herself in their beauty until the sound of the barn door closing alerted her to Bennett's return. Still awake, he called softly as he approached the cabin. "The stars were too beautiful to miss," she replied. Bennett nodded, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "They'll be there tomorrow night too. Get some sleep, Willow." Despite his gentle command, Willow found sleep elusive once again. The knowledge that in 2 weeks she would be Bennett's wife in truth filled her with both anticipation and anxiety. He had been nothing but respectful and kind, but marriage meant sharing a bed, sharing a life completely. Would the cautious companionship they developed be enough foundation for a lasting union? The next 2 days passed in a flurry of activity, as Willow divided her time between household chores, wedding preparations, and continuing to learn the skills of ranch life. Bennett remained mysteriously busy in the barn for hours each day, brushing off her questions with good-natured evasiveness. On the 3rd evening after their trip to town, Bennett appeared at the cabin door just before supper with an unusual request. "I need your help with something in the barn," he said. "Would you come with me?" Intrigued, Willow followed him across the yard as the setting sun cast long shadows. Inside the barn, Bennett led her past the horse stalls to the ladder that accessed the hayloft. "Up there," he said, gesturing toward the ladder. Mystified, Willow gathered her skirts and climbed carefully. When she reached the top and turned to look around the hayloft, she gasped. Bennett had transformed the space. Fresh hay covered in clean blankets created a comfortable sleeping area, but what truly stunned her was the ceiling, or rather, the lack of it. A section of the roof, perhaps 4 feet square, had been removed and replaced with a window of sorts, framed in wood but open to the sky. "Bennett," she whispered as he climbed up behind her. "What is this?" "You can't sleep without the stars," he said simply. "I thought this might help until you get accustomed to the cabin." Tears welled in Willow's eyes as the thoughtfulness of his gesture overwhelmed her. "You built this for me." Bennett shrugged, suddenly awkward. "It wasn't much work. Just rearranged some of the roof boards and framed it out so it won't leak if it rains. There's a canvas cover I can pull across if the weather turns bad." "It's the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me," Willow said softly. Bennett's cheeks colored slightly at her praise. "Well, I need my wife well rested. Can't have you falling asleep in the chicken coop." Despite his attempt at humor, Willow saw the genuine care behind his actions. On impulse, she stepped forward and placed a gentle kiss on his cheek. "Thank you, Bennett." That night, Willow slept in the hayloft beneath her window of stars. For the first time since arriving at Whispering Creek Ranch, she slept deeply and peacefully, the open sky above her a constant reassurance through the night. Over the next days, the window in the hayloft became Willow's nightly retreat. Bennett never commented on her sleeping arrangements, simply accepting that she needed the stars as others needed bread or water. During the days, their easy companionship deepened as they worked side by side, preparing the ranch for the coming winter and making arrangements for their wedding. One afternoon, about a week before the wedding, a wagon appeared on the road to the ranch. Willow, who was hanging laundry in the yard, shaded her eyes to watch its approach. "Were you expecting visitors?" she called to Bennett, who was mending a fence nearby. He straightened, following her gaze. "That's Thomas and Mary Parker," he said. "Neighbors from the next valley over. Good folks." The Parkers proved to be a middle-aged couple who greeted Bennett warmly and Willow with friendly curiosity. "So you're the mail-order bride Bennett's been waiting for," Mary said, clasping Willow's hands. "I'm so pleased to meet you, dear. We've been telling this stubborn man for years that he needed a wife." "Now, Mary," her husband chided gently, "don't embarrass the poor girl." Bennett invited the Parkers in for coffee, and soon the four of them were seated around the kitchen table, sharing news and stories. Willow learned that the Parkers had been among the first settlers in the area 15 years earlier and had helped Bennett establish his ranch when he arrived 5 years ago. Bennett was just a city boy from Denver with big dreams and no experience, Thomas laughed. "Didn't even know which end of a cow to milk." "That's because you don't milk bulls, Thomas," Bennett retorted good-naturedly. "A lesson I learned the hard way." As the conversation flowed, Willow found herself relaxing in the warm atmosphere of friendship. It was the first time since arriving in Colorado that she'd interacted with anyone besides Bennett, and the Parkers' obvious affection for him reassured her about the man she was about to marry. Before leaving, Mary pulled Willow aside while the men discussed cattle prices on the porch. "Bennett's a good man," the older woman said quietly. "One of the best I know. He works hard and keeps his word. You've chosen well or been chosen well, however these arrangements work." "Thank you," Willow replied. "I'm beginning to think so too." Mary smiled kindly. "Marriage out here isn't easy, especially for women used to city ways. But if you love the land and come to love your husband, there's no better life." After the Parkers departed, promising to attend the wedding the following week, Bennett turned to Willow. "What did Mary have to say to you?" She looked quite serious. "She was telling me I'd chosen a good man," Willow answered honestly. Bennett looked away, but not before Willow caught the pleased expression that crossed his face. "Mary's biased. She's been mothering me since I arrived." "Nevertheless," Willow said, "I think she's right." That evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Bennett asked Willow about her life before Colorado. "You haven't spoken much about Philadelphia," he observed. "Was it very difficult to leave?" Willow considered her answer carefully. "There wasn't much to leave behind. My parents died of influenza when I was 16. I lived with my aunt for a while, but she passed 2 years ago. I worked as a seamstress in a dress shop, but the wages barely covered room and board. No suitors." "A pretty woman like you must have had opportunities." Willow smiled sadly. "A few, but none I cared to accept. One was my employer's son, who thought a seamstress would make an easy conquest. Another was a widower with 5 children who needed a mother more than a wife." She paused. "When I saw your advertisement, it seemed honest. You wanted a partner, not a servant or an ornament." Bennett nodded thoughtfully. "My father always said that a man's word and a woman's heart are the only things worth having in this life." "I'm not one for fancy words or grand gestures, Willow, but I mean to be a good husband to you." "I know," she said softly. "Your actions speak clearly enough." The following morning, Willow awoke in the hayloft to the sound of rainfall pattering against the canvas cover Bennett had pulled across her star window. The sound was soothing rather than distressing, and she realized with surprise that knowing the stars were still there, just temporarily hidden, was enough. Bennett's thoughtfulness had not only given her a way to see the stars, but had somehow made them a permanent part of her, accessible even when covered by clouds. As the wedding day approached, Willow finished sewing her dress and prepared for her new role as Mrs. Bennett Winters. The nervous anxiety she'd felt earlier had transformed into quiet anticipation. Bennett was not the husband she had imagined for herself in girlhood dreams, but he was steadfast and kind, and she found herself increasingly drawn to his quiet strength. The night before their wedding, Bennett surprised her with a small wooden box after dinner. "A wedding gift," he explained, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "It's traditional to wait until tomorrow, but I thought you might want to wear it." Inside the box, nestled on a scrap of velvet, was a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a star, suspended on a fine chain. "Bennett," Willow breathed, lifting the necklace from its box. "It's beautiful." "I had it made in town," he admitted. "Thought you should have your stars with you always, not just at night." Willow turned and lifted her hair, silently asking him to fasten the necklace around her neck. His calloused fingers brushed her skin as he secured the clasp, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Thank you," she said, turning back to face him, one hand touching the star pendant. "I'll treasure it always." Bennett cleared his throat, suddenly awkward again. "Well, big day tomorrow. I should turn in early." Willow nodded, understanding his retreat. Tomorrow would change everything between them, transforming their careful friendship into the intimacy of marriage. As she climbed to her hayloft sanctuary that night, Willow found herself wondering if this would be her last night sleeping beneath the stars. Once they were properly married, she would be expected to share Bennett's bed. The thought brought a blush to her cheeks and a flutter to her stomach that wasn't entirely anxiety. Morning dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved of the day's proceedings. Mary Parker arrived early to help Willow prepare, bringing with her a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers tied with a blue ribbon. "Something borrowed," Mary explained, pointing to the ribbon. "It was from my own wedding dress, 20 years ago." With Mary's help, Willow dressed in her cream-colored gown, which fell in simple, elegant lines from a modest square neckline. Her auburn hair was arranged in a knot at the nape of her neck, with a few curls left free to frame her face. Bennett's star pendant rested at her throat, catching the light when she moved. "You look beautiful, dear," Mary said, her eyes misty. "Bennett won't know what hit him." The wagon ride to town was filled with anticipation. Bennett, dressed in his best clothes, clean dark trousers, a white shirt, and a black vest, kept stealing glances at Willow as if seeing her for the first time. The small church was surprisingly full when they arrived. It seemed that news of Bennett Winters finally taking a bride had spread throughout Cannon City and the surrounding area. Faces both familiar and strange turned to watch as Willow walked down the short aisle to where Bennett waited beside Reverend Michaels. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Willow and Bennett exchanged traditional vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other until death parted them. When Bennett slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, another surprise he'd kept from her, Willow felt tears threatening. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Michaels declared. "You may kiss your bride." Bennett hesitated only a moment before leaning down to place a gentle kiss on Willow's lips, their first kiss, sweet and full of promise. The celebration afterward at the town's only hotel was a joyful affair. It seemed that everyone in Cannon City had contributed something: food, music, or simply their good wishes. Willow was introduced to so many people that their names and faces blurred together, but the genuine warmth of their welcome touched her deeply. "Did you know all these people would come?" she asked Bennett as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. He shook his head, looking somewhat bewildered himself. "I've never been one for socializing, but out here, a wedding is a community event. It gives folks an excuse to set aside their work and remember that life's about more than just surviving." As the sun began to set, Bennett leaned close to Willow's ear. "Should we head home? It's a long ride back to the ranch." Home. The word resonated within her. Whispering Creek Ranch had become home in the short weeks she'd been there, and now it would be truly theirs together. The ride back was quiet, the air between them charged with unspoken thoughts. When they arrived at the ranch, Bennett helped her down from the wagon with gentle hands that lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "I'll see to the horses," he said. Go on inside if you'd like." Willow nodded, suddenly shy. "I'll make us some tea." Inside the cabin, Willow moved about the familiar space, now seeing it through new eyes. This was her home and Bennett was her husband. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. When Bennett entered some time later, Willow had changed from her wedding dress into her nightgown and robe, with the promised tea waiting on the table. Bennett's eyes widened slightly at the sight of her in her night clothes, but he said nothing as he hung his hat on its customary peg by the door. "Tea," Willow offered, her voice barely above a whisper. Bennett nodded, taking a seat at the table. Willow poured for both of them, then sat across from him, her eyes fixed on her cup. "Willow," Bennett began hesitantly, "I want you to know that I don't expect. That is, I understand if you need time to adjust to our new situation." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "What do you mean?" Bennett's cheeks reddened slightly. "Marriage brings certain expectations, but I don't want you to feel rushed or uncomfortable. If you prefer to keep to your own room for now, or even the hayloft, I understand." Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Willow's chest. "That's very considerate of you, Bennett." He reached across the table to take her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I meant what I said in my vows today. I will honor you, Willow. That means respecting your wishes and your comfort." Impulsively, Willow rose from her chair and moved around the table to stand before him. Taking his face between her hands, she leaned down and pressed her lips to his in a kiss far less chaste than the one they'd shared in the church. When she finally pulled away, Bennett looked up at her with wonder. "What was that for?" "For being the kind of man who would build a window for the stars," she answered softly. "For being patient and honorable. For being the husband I never dared hope for." Bennett stood, drawing her into his arms. "Does that mean you'll stay with me tonight, as my wife?" "Yes," Willow whispered against his chest. "As your wife." That night, Willow discovered that the intimacy of marriage, though new and somewhat frightening, could also be beautiful when shared with a gentle, caring partner. Bennett's tenderness and consideration extended to this most private aspect of their relationship, and by the time they fell asleep in each other's arms, Willow felt truly married in every sense. In the quiet hours before dawn, Willow awoke briefly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar sensation of Bennett's arm around her waist and his steady breathing against her neck. Through the small window of their bedroom, she could see a patch of sky where a few fading stars still glimmered. The sight no longer brought the desperate longing she'd felt before. Bennett's star pendant rested against her skin, and the man himself held her close. She had found another kind of infinity in his arms. The days and weeks that followed settled into a rhythm of shared work and growing affection. Autumn painted the Colorado landscape in brilliant hues of gold and crimson as Bennett and Willow prepared the ranch for the coming winter. They worked side by side, mending fences, storing food, and ensuring the livestock would be sheltered from the harsh weather ahead. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire, sometimes reading aloud from one of the few books Bennett owned, sometimes simply talking about their day or their hopes for the future. Willow learned that Bennett had come west after the death of his parents, seeking a fresh start away from painful memories. He'd worked as a ranch hand for several years before saving enough to purchase his own land. "I was lonely," he admitted one night as they lay in bed, his fingers absently stroking her hair. "I never thought much about marriage until Thomas mentioned how his sister had found a husband through a matrimonial newspaper. The idea took root, and soon I found myself writing that advertisement." "Are you glad you did?" Willow asked, tilting her face up to see his expression in the dim light. Bennett's answer was to kiss her deeply. "What do you think?" As winter approached, Bennett kept his promise about Willow's star window in the hayloft. Though she now slept contentedly in their shared bed, he often found her there in the evenings, gazing up at the night sky. "I'm starting to think I have competition for your affections," he teased one night, climbing up to join her. "The stars were my first love," Willow admitted, "but they're cold and distant companions compared to you." Bennett settled beside her on the blankets, pulling her close against the November chill. "When I was a boy in Denver, my father took me camping in the mountains once. I remember being terrified by how bright the stars were, how endless the sky seemed. But you found comfort in that vastness from the start." "They remind me that there's something greater than my troubles," Willow explained. "When my parents died and when my aunt passed, the stars were constant when everything else changed. They became my anchor." Bennett was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the heavens above them. "I think I understand now. We all need something to hold on to when life turns upside down." "What was your anchor?" Willow asked. "The land," he answered without hesitation. "Working the earth, watching things grow, knowing that no matter what happens, the seasons turn and life continues. That's why I needed to have my own ranch, not just work someone else's." They lay together in comfortable silence, until the cold drove them back to the warmth of their cabin. As they snuggled beneath the quilts of their bed, Willow realized how far she had come from the frightened, lonely woman who had stepped off the train in Cannon City just months before. The first major snowfall came in early December, transforming the landscape into a glittering white expanse. Willow awoke to find Bennett already up and stoking the fire to ward off the bitter cold. "Snow's about 2 feet deep," he reported. "Looks like we're in for a proper winter storm. I'll need to check on the livestock and make sure everything's secure." Willow hurried to prepare a hearty breakfast before Bennett ventured out into the storm. As she watched him trudge through the snow toward the barn, a wave of protective concern washed over her. When had his welfare become so essential to her happiness? The answer came to her as she kneaded dough for bread later that morning. She had fallen in love with her husband. Not the practical arrangement she had agreed to when answering his advertisement, but true, deep love that made her heart ache when he was out of sight and sore when he returned. Bennett spent most of the day battling the elements to ensure the animals were safe and fed. When he finally returned to the cabin as darkness fell, he was exhausted and chilled to the bone. Willow helped him out of his frozen outer clothes and sat him by the fire, bringing him hot coffee laced with a precious spoonful of whiskey from the bottle he kept for medicinal purposes. "You're an angel," Bennett sighed as the warmth began to penetrate his cold limbs. "A man couldn't ask for a better wife." "I was worried about you," Willow confessed, kneeling beside his chair to chafe his cold hands between her warm ones. Bennett's blue eyes, tired as they were, softened as they met hers. "Were you now? I'm tougher than I look, Mrs. Winters." "Nevertheless," Willow replied, "I find I'm quite attached to you and would prefer you didn't freeze to death." A smile tugged at Bennett's lips. "Attached, is it?" "Well, that's something." "It's more than something," Willow said softly. "I love you, Bennett. I thought you should know." For a moment, Bennett stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. Then, with a groan that was half joy and half disbelief, he pulled her into his arms, nearly toppling them both from the chair. "Say it again," he demanded, his face inches from hers. "I love you," Willow repeated, laughing at his reaction. Bennett kissed her then, a kiss so full of passion and tenderness that it left her breathless. When he finally pulled away, his eyes shone with emotion. "I've loved you since you kissed my cheek for building that fool star window," he confessed. "Maybe even before that, when I saw you step off that train looking so brave and frightened all at once." "Why didn't you say anything?" Willow asked, cupping his bearded cheek with her hand. Bennett turned his face to press a kiss into her palm. I didn't want to pressure you. Our arrangement was practical, not romantic. I hoped you might come to care for me in time, but I never expected. He trailed off, shaking his head in wonder. Well, Willow said pragmatically, it seems we've both gotten more from this marriage than we bargained for. That night, despite the howling storm outside, Willow and Bennett created their own warmth, expressing in touch what they had finally admitted in words. Afterward, as they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Willow felt a contentment she had never known before. The stars might be hidden by the storm clouds, but she had found her true north in Bennett's love. The winter of 1876-1877 proved to be one of the harshest in Colorado's memory. Snow piled high around the cabin, and on some days, Bennett had to dig paths to the barn and back. But inside their snug home, Willow and Bennett created a haven of warmth and love. During the long evenings when outdoor work was impossible, Bennett taught Willow to play checkers and a card game called euchre. She, in turn, read to him from the few books they owned, her clear voice bringing the stories to life as the fire crackled in the hearth. It was during one such evening in late January that Willow set aside the book and turned to Bennett with news she had been contemplating how to share. I believe we may need to prepare another bedroom by summer's end, she said carefully. Bennett looked up from the bridle he was mending, confusion evident on his face. Are you expecting a visitor? Willow smiled, one hand drifting to rest on her still flat stomach. In a manner of speaking. One who will stay permanently if all goes well. Understanding dawned slowly in Bennett's eyes, followed by astonishment and then joy so profound it transformed his features. A baby, he whispered, setting aside his work. You're with child, Willow nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. I've suspected for a few weeks now, but I wanted to be certain before telling you. Bennett crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering her into his arms with a whoop of delight that startled a laugh from Willow. Careful, she protested through her laughter. I'm in a delicate condition, as they say. You're the strongest woman I know, Bennett countered, but he set her gently back in her chair, kneeling before her with wonder in his eyes. A baby, our baby. Are you pleased? Willow asked, though his reaction had already answered her question. Pleased doesn't begin to describe it, Bennett replied, placing a reverent hand over hers on her stomach. I never thought. That is, I hoped someday, but so soon. Nature has its own timing, Willow said softly. The baby should arrive in late August or early September, according to my calculations. Bennett's mind was clearly racing ahead. We'll need to prepare. A cradle, clothes, perhaps expand the cabin a bit to make a proper nursery, and you'll need help with the heavier chores as your time approaches. We have months yet, Willow reminded him gently, though I won't object if you want to start on that cradle soon. That night, as snow pelted against the windows and the wind moaned around the eaves of their cabin, Bennett held Willow close, his hand protectively covering the place where their child grew. Thank you, he murmured against her hair. For what? Willow asked sleepily. For answering my advertisement, for coming west, for loving me, for this miracle. His voice caught on the last words. I never imagined being this happy. Willow turned in his arms to face him, her heart overflowing with love for this good, steadfast man who had become her world. Nor I. It seems we both found more than we were looking for. As winter slowly released its grip on the land, signs of new life emerged all around Whispering Creek Ranch. The first calves were born in late February, wobbling uncertainly beside their mothers in the barn's warmth. Shoots of green pushed through the melting snow, and birds returned from their winter migrations, filling the air with song. Willow's body changed too, the gentle swell of her belly becoming more pronounced as spring advanced. Bennett watched these changes with a mixture of awe and protectiveness that amused and touched Willow in equal measure. "I'm not made of glass," she reminded him when he tried to prevent her from helping with the spring planting of their vegetable garden. "Indulge me," Bennett replied, his hands settling on her growing middle. "I've never been a father before." True to his word, Bennett began work on a cradle as soon as the weather permitted him to work comfortably in the barn. Crafted from pine with loving attention to detail, the cradle took shape over weeks of evening work. When it was finished, he rubbed it smooth with beeswax and presented it to Willow with shy pride. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, running her fingers over the polished wood. "Our baby will sleep peacefully in such a lovely bed." As Willow's pregnancy progressed, they discussed names during their evening conversations by the fire. "If it's a boy," Bennett suggested, "perhaps William after your father." Willow smiled at his thoughtfulness. "And if it's a girl, perhaps Beatrice after your mother." "Beatrice Winters." Bennett tested the name. "It has a nice sound to it." In May, Mary Parker came to stay for a week, bringing with her knowledge and advice about childbirth that eased Willow's growing anxiety. The older woman examined Willow carefully and pronounced both mother and child to be in excellent health. "You're made for bearing children, my dear," Mary assured her. "Strong and healthy. Everything is progressing just as it should." Before leaving, Mary extracted a promise from Bennett that he would send for her when Willow's time came. "I've helped bring more than a dozen babies into this world," she reminded him. "You'll want experienced hands nearby." As summer heated up, Willow found herself increasingly uncomfortable. The baby was active, kicking and shifting constantly as if impatient to enter the world. The heat made sleep difficult, and on many nights, Willow would make her way to the hayloft, where her star window provided both a view of the night sky and a welcome breeze. Bennett often joined her there, bringing a cool drink of water or simply offering his companionship. On one such night in late July, as they lay on the blankets looking up at the stars, the baby gave a particularly strong kick that was visible even through Willow's nightgown. Bennett laughed in delight, placing his hand over the spot. "This child has your spirit, wife, already reaching for the stars." "Or your stubbornness," Willow countered with a smile, determined to make its presence known. Bennett's expression grew thoughtful. "Do you ever regret it?" "Coming here, I mean. Your life would have been so different if you'd stayed in Philadelphia." Willow considered the question seriously. "I was barely surviving there, Bennett. I had no family, few friends, and little hope for the future. Here." She gestured to the stars above, the ranch around them, and finally placed her hand over his on her belly. "Here I have everything that matters." August brought oppressive heat, and the final, uncomfortable stage of Willow's pregnancy. Bennett, concerned about her discomfort, constructed a simple swing on the porch where she could rest in the shade, feeling what little breeze stirred the hot air. It was there, on a sweltering afternoon in late August, that Willow felt the first pains that signaled their baby's imminent arrival. She had been dozing lightly when a sharp cramp caused her to gasp and sit upright. When a second pain followed 10 minutes later, she knew it was time. "Bennett," she called, knowing he was working nearby in the garden. He came running at the urgency in her voice, his eyes widening when she explained what was happening. "I'll fetch Thomas to go for Mary," he said, helping Willow to her feet. "Let's get you comfortable inside first." The labor progressed steadily through the afternoon and into the evening. Mary arrived just as the sun was setting, bringing with her clean linens, herbs for tea, and the calm competence that Willow desperately needed as the pains intensified. Bennett was banished to the main room of the cabin, where Thomas kept him company and prevented him from wearing a path in the floorboards with his anxious pacing. Occasionally, Willow's cries of pain would reach them, causing Bennett to wince and move instinctively toward the bedroom door, only to be gently restrained by Thomas. "Women have been doing this since Eve," the older man reminded him. "Mary knows her business and your Willow is strong." As midnight approached, the intervals between Willow's pains shortened dramatically. Mary examined her and announced that the time had come to push. Bennett, hearing Willow's exhausted moans transform into more determined sounds, could bear it no longer. He brushed past Thomas and entered the bedroom, going immediately to Willow's side. Her face was flushed with effort, her hair damp with sweat, but her eyes brightened at the sight of him. "Bennett," she gasped between pains, "you shouldn't be here." "There's nowhere else I should be," he replied firmly, taking her hand. "Tell me what to do, Mary." The older woman assessed him with a critical eye, then nodded. "Sit behind her, let her lean against you. It will help with the pushing." Bennett did as instructed, cradling Willow between his legs with her back against his chest, supporting her as she bore down with each contraction. His strong arms provided leverage, and his murmured encouragement gave her strength when she thought she had none left to give. "One more big push," Mary instructed after what seemed like hours. "I can see the head." With a guttural cry that transformed into a sob of relief, Willow gave a final mighty effort, and their child slipped into the world with a lusty wail that filled the room. "A boy," Mary announced triumphantly, quickly wiping the baby's face and placing him on Willow's chest. "A fine, strong boy." Bennett peered over Willow's shoulder at their son, his vision blurring with tears of joy and wonder. The baby's face was red and scrunched in outrage, his tiny fists waving as he protested his abrupt entry into the world. "William," Willow whispered, her exhaustion forgotten as she counted fingers and toes with trembling hands. "Hello, my little William." "William Bennett Winters," Bennett amended, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome to Whispering Creek Ranch, son." After the afterbirth was delivered and both mother and baby were cleaned up, Mary left the new family alone, closing the bedroom door softly behind her. Bennett stretched out on the bed beside Willow, who was drowsily nursing their son for the first time. "You were magnificent," Bennett told her, pressing a kiss to her damp forehead. "I've never seen anything so miraculous." Willow smiled tiredly. "He has your eyes, I think." "And your determined spirit," Bennett replied, gently stroking the baby's dark hair. "Poor child is likely to be as stubborn as both of us combined." As baby William finished nursing and drifted to sleep against his mother's breast, Bennett carefully took him, cradling the tiny form against his chest with awed reverence. The baby squirmed slightly, then settled, one small hand clutching his father's finger. "I never knew it was possible to love someone so instantly and completely," Bennett whispered. "It's like my heart expanded to make room for him alongside you." Willow watched her husband and son with drowsy contentment. "That's exactly what happens. Love doesn't divide when shared, it multiplies." The first weeks of William's life passed in a blur of feedings, changings, and moments of pure joy interspersed with bone-deep exhaustion. Bennett proved to be an attentive father, willing to walk the floor with his fussing son in the middle of the night, so Willow could get a few precious hours of sleep. By mid-September, they had settled into something resembling a routine. William was a good baby overall, with a healthy appetite and lungs that left no doubt when he was displeased. His arrival had changed the rhythm of ranch life, with chores and tasks now scheduled around his needs, but neither Willow nor Bennett would have had it any other way. On a particularly beautiful autumn evening, when William was about a month old, Bennett found Willow in the hayloft with the baby. She was showing him the stars through the window, her voice soft as she named the constellations for him. "That's the Big Dipper," she was saying as Bennett climbed up to join them. "And see how those stars form a W shape. That's Cassiopeia, the queen." "Starting his education early?" Bennett asked, settling beside them on the blankets. Willow smiled. "It's never too early to learn about the stars. They'll always guide him home, no matter how far he roams." Bennett studied his wife's face in the starlight, struck anew by her beauty and the depth of his love for her. "When I built this window, I never imagined our son would enjoy it too." "You built it because you understood me, even when I barely understood myself," Willow replied, leaning against his shoulder with William nestled securely in her arms. "You saw what I needed and made it happen without judgment or question." "That's what love is, isn't it?" Bennett mused. "Seeing the other person clearly and accepting them completely." "Yes," Willow agreed softly. "And I see you too, Bennett Winters, the kind, honorable man who became my husband, my best friend, and the father of my child." As the stars wheeled overhead, the little family remained in their sanctuary, bound together by love and the simple miracle of finding home in each other's hearts. The mail-order bride who couldn't sleep without the stars above had found her place in the world, thanks to the cowboy who built a roof with a window and, in doing so, opened a window to love that would illuminate their lives forever. In the years that followed, Whispering Creek Ranch flourished under Bennett and Willow's care. The herd grew, the fields yielded abundant crops, and their family expanded as well. William was joined by a sister, Beatrice, 2 years later, and a brother, Thomas, 2 years after that. Bennett eventually expanded their cabin into a proper house with bedrooms for each child. But no matter how the structure changed, one feature remained constant: the star window in what was now a proper loft room rather than a hayloft. It became a special place for the Winters family, where stories were told, dreams were shared, and the infinite possibilities of the universe seemed within reach. And on their 10th wedding anniversary, Bennett presented Willow with a gift that brought tears to her eyes: a small addition to their bedroom with a ceiling made entirely of glass, so they could fall asleep together, beneath the stars, every night for the rest of their lives. "Some women need diamonds," Bennett said as Willow gazed in wonder at his creation. "My wife needs stars. And you," Willow added, drawing his face down for a kiss. "Always you."